Ladies and gentlemen, Asian guy here. I need you to stop celebrating New Year's Eve right now. Put down the champagne, turn off the fireworks, cancel your party plans because we are witnessing the final 12 hours of the global silver market as we know it. In less than 24 hours on January 1st, 2026, China implements the most draconian export restrictions on silver in modern history. And tonight on New Year's Eve, while you were getting ready to toast 2026, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange just delivered the most cynical, coordinated price manipulation in the history of commodity trading. Silver crashed 5.2% to 72.25 in after-hours trading following the CME's third margin hike in 2 weeks. Think about that timing. Think about the malicious precision of that timing. T-minus 12 hours before the largest silver supplier on Earth closes its borders forever. And the CME chooses this moment, New Year's Eve, when liquidity is at its thinnest, when senior traders are at holiday parties, when the world's attention is on countdowns and celebrations to drop the hammer one final time. This isn't risk management. This is a coordinated smash designed to shake out every last leveraged long position before the supply crisis goes live tomorrow morning. But here's what makes tonight's crash different from every other silver manipulation in history. While the paper price was being destroyed in Chicago, while New Year's Eve algos were dumping contracts into a liquidity vacuum, the physical market in Shanghai was trading silver at $91 per ounce. Let me repeat that. Paper silver, $72, physical silver, $91. That's a $19 spread. That's not a market anymore. That's two separate universes operating on completely different laws of physics. We are watching the final divorce between fantasy and reality, between digital promises and atomic elements, between Western financial engineering and Eastern industrial stockpiling. The game ends tomorrow. The countdown has begun. And what you're about to witness in the next 12 hours will determine whether you're holding worthless paper when the music stops, or whether you're holding the most strategic metal on Earth when China locks the vault forever. Let me take you inside the war room at the CME tonight because this third margin hike isn't just another adjustment, it's the nuclear option. It's the financial equivalent of scorched earth warfare. At 6:47 p.m. Eastern Time, while families across America were preparing for New Year's celebrations, the CME released Advisory Notice 25-398. Buried in the bureaucratic language was a bombshell. Initial margin requirements for March 2026 silver futures jumped from $25,000 to $30,500 per contract. That's a 30% increase in a single day. But when you combine it with the previous two hikes, the total increase since December 15th is now 86%. Let me translate that into human terms. 3 weeks ago, you needed $17,500 to control 5,000 ounces of silver. Tonight, you need $32,500. They've nearly doubled the cost of playing the paper game in 21 days. This isn't gradual risk management. This is a systematic liquidation campaign designed to purge every speculative long position from the market before China's export ban takes effect. Here's how the trap worked. For months, as silver climbed from $30 to $50 to $70 to $84, leveraged funds piled in. Hedge funds, family offices, momentum traders, all using borrowed money to amplify their bets. Many of these positions were opened when margins were $15,000 or $18,000. These traders budgeted for normal market conditions. They planned for volatility, but they never planned for the CME to change the rules of the game 3 times in 2 weeks. The forced liquidation began at 7:23 p.m. Automated margin calls started firing across trading floors from Greenwich to Chicago. Traders who thought they were safely capitalized suddenly faced demands for tens of thousands of additional dollars. Post the cash by midnight or get liquidated automatically. Most couldn't post the cash. It was New Year's Eve. Banks were closed. Wire departments were staffed by skeleton crews. Credit lines were frozen until January 2nd, so they got liquidated, all at once. In the thin New Year's Eve session, with no institutional buying to absorb the selling, the price didn't tick down gradually. It fell off a cliff. The algorithms don't care that it's a holiday. They don't care that the selling is artificial. They just execute, sell at market, sell at any price, get out before the losses get worse. And this brings us to the mathematical brutality of what just happened. According to preliminary data from the CFTC, approximately 11,200 contracts were forced liquidated between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 56 million ounces of silver dumped into a holiday market in 2 hours. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 7% of annual global mining supply liquidated on New Year's Eve by traders who didn't want to sell, forced out by margin requirements that were tripled in 3 weeks. But here's the smoking gun that proves this was coordinated. The CME didn't just raise margins randomly. They calculated the exact pain threshold needed to trigger maximum liquidation. Internal risk models showed that $32,500 was the break point where 85% of leveraged longs would be forced to exit. They designed the margin hike to create a liquidation avalanche. They weaponized their regulatory authority to manipulate the market. But while Chicago was engineering a paper crash, something extraordinary was happening 7,000 miles away in Shanghai. The Shanghai Futures Exchange didn't follow the CME crash. In fact, it did the opposite. As New York silver collapsed to $72, Shanghai silver spiked to $91. That's a $19 premium. That's not arbitrage failure. That's market secession. The Chinese are no longer accepting the Western paper price as legitimate. They've declared independence from the CME manipulation. They're setting their own price based on their own supply and demand. And their supply is about to become zero. Let me explain what this $19 spread actually represents. It represents the difference between a manipulated price and a real price. It represents the difference between artificial selling pressure and genuine demand. It represents the difference between a market controlled by algorithms and a market controlled by industrial necessity. Chinese manufacturing giants aren't selling silver tonight, they're buying it. BYD, CATL, Trina Solar, Jinko Solar, they're all bidding $91 for metal that Chicago says is worth $72. Why? Because they know that at midnight tonight, their access to that metal disappears forever. They know that China's export licensing system, which takes effect in 11 hours and 23 minutes, will cut off 60% of global refined silver supply instantly. They know that the companies feeding their supply chains, the small and mid-sized refineries that have been exporting silver to the world for decades, will lose their export licenses at the stroke of midnight, so they're panic buying, not at $72, at $91, because $91 today is cheaper than $150 tomorrow when the supply is gone. The Shanghai Premium is telling you everything you need to know about the real value of silver. It's telling you that the paper crash is fake. It's telling you that the physical demand is real. It's telling you that the industrial users who actually need silver don't care about CME margin calls. They care about securing supply before the doors close forever. And this creates a paradox that breaks the traditional arbitrage mechanism. Usually, when you see a $19 spread between exchanges, traders rush to buy the cheap metal and sell the expensive metal until prices converge. But you can't arbitrage this spread. Why? Because the metal that's cheap in New York can't be shipped to Shanghai. The export licensing system that takes effect tomorrow makes it illegal. The arbitrage bridge is being burned as we speak. The global silver market is splitting into two separate universes. The Western paper market, controlled by the CME's margin manipulation, and the Eastern physical market, controlled by Chinese industrial demand. And once that split is complete, the paper price becomes irrelevant. Who cares if the CME says silver is $72 if you can't buy any at 72s? Who cares about futures contracts if the futures can't be delivered? The Shanghai Premium is the preview of the New World Order. It's showing you what silver will trade at when the artificial suppression ends. $91 is not the ceiling, it's the floor. In exactly 8 hours and 47 minutes, as Americans are nursing hangovers and making New Year's resolutions, the Chinese government will implement the most significant supply disruption in the history of the silver market. Every silver refinery in China will need a government license to export. The qualification requirements are designed to eliminate 90% of current exporters overnight. Companies need 80 tons of annual production capacity, $30 million in credit lines, and state approval. The mom-and-pop refineries that have been feeding global supply chains for decades don't qualify. They're cut off instantly. But the impact goes beyond just Chinese refineries. China controls the entire global silver processing infrastructure. Raw silver mined in Mexico gets shipped to China for refining. Silver recycled in Europe gets shipped to China for processing. Even silver mined in other countries flows through Chinese facilities before reaching end users. When China closes its export doors tomorrow, it's not just cutting off Chinese silver, it's choking off the entire global supply chain. The industrial panic that's driving Shanghai silver to $91 tonight is just the beginning. Tomorrow morning, when procurement managers across the Western world wake up and realize their suppliers have disappeared overnight, the real scramble begins. Tesla needs 2.3 million ounces annually for its Austin Gigafactory. Where do they get it now? Apple needs 15 million ounces for iPhone production. Where do they source it? Samsung needs 8 million ounces for semiconductor manufacturing. Their contracts just became worthless. These companies built their supply chains on the assumption that Chinese silver would always be available at global market prices. They optimized for efficiency, not security. They chose just-in-time delivery over strategic reserves. Tomorrow morning, just-in-time becomes just too late. And this is where tonight's paper crash becomes a gift to the industrial users. The CME's manipulation gave them one last chance to hedge at artificially low prices. While leveraged speculators were getting liquidated at $72, smart industrial buyers were quietly accumulating. They used the fake crash to secure supply at a 20% discount to the real Shanghai price. But that window closes at midnight. After January 1st, there is no more discount. There is no more manipulation. There is only scarcity and demand. The companies that didn't use tonight's crash to hedge their 2026 needs will spend the next 12 months competing for the remaining Western silver at whatever price it takes. And this brings us to the mathematical reality of the new supply-demand balance. Before the China ban, global silver production was roughly 800 million ounces annually. Global consumption was 1.1 billion ounces. That left a deficit of 300 million ounces that was filled by Chinese recycling and processing. Tomorrow, that 300 million ounce supply disappears instantly. The Western world will have to survive on 500 million ounces of non-Chinese supply to meet 800 million ounces of non-Chinese demand. That's a 300 million ounce shortage. That's a 38% supply deficit. In any other commodity, a 38% supply deficit would send prices to the moon overnight. But silver isn't any other commodity. Silver is the most electrically conductive element on the periodic table. You can't substitute it in high-performance applications. You can't innovate around chemistry. You can't code your way out of a physics problem. When the supply disappears, you either pay the price or shut down the factory. And this is why tonight's $72 crash is so breathtakingly cynical. The CME engineered a final liquidation event to give the appearance that silver demand is weak, that the rally was just speculation, that the shortage isn't real. They timed it perfectly for New Year's Eve, when the world wasn't paying attention. They wanted to create the illusion that silver was crashing just as the China ban was taking effect. They wanted to make it look like the ban doesn't matter. But the Shanghai premium gives away the game. $91 versus $70. Physical demand versus paper manipulation. Reality versus propaganda. The CME can force leveraged speculators to sell their contracts, but they can't force Chinese manufacturers to stop buying silver. They can manipulate the paper price, but they can't manipulate atomic element 47. They can control the algorithm, but they can't control the assembly line. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises on January 1st, 2026, the most sophisticated price suppression scheme in history ends, not because the suppressors gave up, but because they ran out of metal to suppress with. The vaults are empty, the suppliers are banned, the game is over, and the price that emerges from this chaos won't be the paper price. It won't be the manipulated price. It will be the Shanghai price, the real price. The price that reflects genuine scarcity meeting inelastic demand. Tonight's crash to $70 was the last gasp of a dying system. Tomorrow's reality will be the Shanghai reality. $91 and climbing. Because when you control the atoms, you control the future. And China just took control of the atoms. T-0. Game over. Welcome to the post-manipulation silver market. I'm Asian Guy. Remember to hold physical, ignore the paper, and prepare for the reset. The countdown ends at midnight. The new world begins at dawn.